Hello, avid readers, book nerds, or casual observers. Welcome to the read-along brought to you by the Lit Round Table. I'm Joseph.
And I'm Anna, and this is our read-along of The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemisin. Welcome to part 4.
Part 4.
We got, these chapters were heavy.
Yeah.
So we are disturbed and engaged, but also depressed. Lots of talk of genocide.
Yeah, and like demonizing groups of people and...
Yeah, which is super valid. I mean, not to do that, but to have a conversation about it. Anyway,
and like really
names.
dark like decisions and like having to be really cutthroat about who lives and who dies and desert survival. And it's just like, oof.
It was a lot.
Yeah.
So I guess just a moment to check in with the other readers. Hope y'all are doing okay.
Yeah.
Our chapter names, though, for this week, we've got Chapter 8, Nassun Underground, and then we had a Syl Anagist 2, and Chapter 10, The Desert, Briefly, and You. I was kind of glad that we didn't have to spend the whole time in the desert with them, and that we got a little bit of a jump cut at the end.
Yes. Yeah.
So thank you, Hoa, for doing that for us, because it was going to be a long haul.
Yeah.
Who do you want to talk about first today, Joseph?
I guess, should we just do it in order, since they're all different?
Yeah.
So start with Nassun.
Yep. She's underground, as the title suggests.
Indeed.
No, this was fascinating, because she is, I presume, she's at where the Syl Anagist chapters are also taking place.
That was what I thought as well. Yeah.
So fascinating to see how it has changed. And the description of, like, okay, so they go underground, right? And they're in this cave. And then Nassun discovers that it's not, like, it's a cave, but the sieve that's, like, built in this cave was developed before it became a cave. Like, she has this realization by looking at, like, the structure of the ceiling and, like, being, like, an, I'm drawing a total blank on what they're called. Erogenous users, what are they called?
Oh, an origin?
Origin.
Like, yeah.
Thank you. I was like, an organist, and I was like, what?
An organist?
My brain was like, that's so wrong. And then all I could think of was an organist? No.
I mean, also raga, but that's like derogatory. So I don't want to use that one. Yeah.
Correct. Okay. Like, anyway, by using her origin, like, sensing abilities and the magic abilities that she has now, figured out that it was destroyed by a lava bubble.
Yeah.
Lava bubble. You should say those two words.
Lava bubble.
It's okay, listener, pause and say lava bubble. It's a very
satisfying
mouthfeel.
Lava bubble.
Those two words.
You're right. I agree.
Oh, weird. Okay, anyway.
That was kind of, it reminded me of, like, you remember Stargate Atlantis, how they've got, like, this shield over the city? I was like, what would happen if you dumped lava on it? And that's kind of what happened.
Right.
Except also everyone inside got cooked.
Right.
Bummer.
So she's, like, sensing it out and figures out that all the stuff that's at the bottom of this dead sieve, it's dust. It's not dirt. It's disintegrated plant vegetation. And that was redundant. Whatever.
And presumably people.
But she discovers through this that, like, this was a sieve that was built out of plants. And that's when I was like, oh, it's the place where the Syl Anagists.
Yeah.
Because they talk about the ground being, like, plants. So it's a real creepy ghost town.
And she said there's a lot of sand too, and I was like, oh, I bet that's like what's left of the glass, like of the buildings and
Yeah.
stuff. I bet it's like metal and sand. It's like, yeah,
Yeah.
if like a skyscraper was destroyed and then like thousands of years later you found the ruins, metal and sand makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and then later they talk about finding that rope that's like a conduit for power, and I'm like, I'm tripping out. We got like Ethernet cables here that are
Yeah,
needing
it's a wire.
power over Ethernet again.
And she juices the place up.
It's freaking me out.
She uses the wires with an obelisk to juice the place up, because that's what Steele wanted.
Right. She became a generator.
So
For real.
The biggest things for me in this chapter were her and Shafa both together realizing that Steele is a bad guy and not wanting him to win, because they figure out, like, Shafa kind of remembers that the obelisks can change people, and he remembers that
it can change people into Stone Eaters.
and he's like, that's what he wants to happen to you, and he's like, I'm not going to let him do that. So they have this moment.
I guess not into Stone Eaters, into stone. Whatever the pre-Stone Eater process,
Yeah.
I guess is what I'm talking about.
And they're like, we're not going to let him win. We're not going to let him do that. But also the moment between Shafa and Nassun where she actually says out loud, like, you're my dad now.
Yeah.
And he accepts it and says that they can protect each other like families do. Mm-hmm. So a very sweet, heartfelt moment, even though Shafa is terrifying. He is kind of Nassun's scary dog privilege.
For sure. I mean, she's kind of got her own, but yes.
Yeah.
He, like, really puts the nail on the coffin.
Anyway, so yeah, those are the two kind of standout moments for me in this chapter. But they got into a weird vehicle. Now that the place is powered up and they're on the move again. So, yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything else? I mean, I feel like we had some, because this is probably the place where the Syl Anagist chapters are happening. It felt like we had some reveal on like what to expect from those chapters as well. So okay, so there is something bad is come. I mean, we knew that.
Yeah.
We knew something bad was coming for the Syl Anagist chapters, but I didn't really have a concept of like what that was going to look like,
right?
For sure. And now I do.
Yeah.
So.
I guess it's always interesting in stories like this when they kind of when they play with time and you see like the ruin of a place and then you're suddenly like launched into the place in the past, like when it was pristine and nice, which is what happens. So that's always kind of interesting to see. Yeah. And when she was talking about like, this looks like a plant, but it's not dead and decayed, even though it should be. At first I was like, is that like a wood carving of a plant? Like, is it...
Oh.
Like,
yeah.
Is that why you think that it looks like wood, but it's not dead? It's like a wood engraving of a plant. But no, it was the wire things. But it's hard. It's like, you have to remember that the characters don't like know things that we know about like what this kind of like society would look like.
Yes.
And you have to like filter your brain like, oh, those are wires. Like, it's like magical wires that are channeling that, even though they don't like know what necessarily a wire looks like, you know?
Right. And it channels power. And the other thing was that Steele asked her to reboot everything. And
that
she
was
was
so
like,
funny.
What does this have to do with boots? And I was like, what an excellent reminder for the reader that they do not have the same language that we have. Like, they don't have the words for things that we have because of technology. And also, what an excellent reminder at how much this story like where the characters are at now are in like a very regressed version
Yes.
of the planet. Like they don't have the technology that they had then.
They have basic,
I
like...
feel bad saying regress, but you know what I mean? Like
Oh,
it
yeah,
feels
yeah.
like they got set way back in time
They
and
did.
they're having to rediscover everything.
Like, they got sent back from technological, magical utopia to...
From our future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They got set back all the way to barely having combustion engines. Like, she talks about how engines are a thing and, like, grain elevators, but, like, they don't have computers, you know.
Right.
Do they have electricity? Do they have light bulbs?
It's unclear to me.
I mean, they had in Castrima, they had, like, the glowing lights that were powered by orogeny, but I feel like
But that was confusing to everybody.
Yeah. So...
Castrima was a place like this place.
Yeah.
But not put in a lava bubble.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, and also, like, the reason it got destroyed apparently was because an obelisk got, like, shoved into the earth, and that caused the lava to erupt because an obelisk got slammed into it. Which sounds terrifying.
It does.
So, I wonder if that's what we'll see well, it didn't happen in this Syl Anagist chapter, but maybe in the next one.
1 or 0, yeah.
We'll see him go nuts. So, I guess we can transition
Yeah.
to that chapter.
Hoa's chapter.
Yeah.
It's still weird. We've had how many of these things, and it's still weird to have Hoa be the center of attention.
Yeah.
But
They're all acting very human.
Oh, hold on. Before we do that, this chapter with Nassun, she and Shafa have the conversation about genocide. He's talking about
yeah.
the because she says that she is terrified of the Guardians except for him, and that they're bad people, and she wishes they could go away forever. And then he's like, well, that would be genocide. And she's like, I don't know what that means. And he's like, well, that means you want to get rid of an entire group of people just for being who they are. And then she has to kind of sit with that. And he explains that the Guardians exist to keep Origins around, because without the Guardians, the Origins would be the victims of genocide, which he's not a reliable narrator.
No, his brain is
So
Swiss
I don't
cheese.
know if that's true or not.
Yeah, to be determined.
I mean, at this point, I believe that that's what he thinks.
Like, perhaps that was their original purpose, and maybe they've been, like, kind of corrupted throughout the years by evil Earth, you know? But maybe their original purpose was to be legitimate guardians to the Origins and, like,
Right.
protect them and keep them from being persecuted, but now they're, like,
At
twisted.
this point, it seems like they're perpetrating
Yeah.
the fear around Origins. You know? But anyway, so that was interesting. And I feel like that was an important conversation to read before going into this next chapter.
Yeah.
With the Syl Anagist, because they are also talking about genocide, sort of.
At least, like, racism.
Kind of. Yeah, I bet. Yeah, okay. So let's talk about it.
Yeah.
So, Syl Anagist.
2.
We still don't know what the other thing is that she was going to show them.
Yeah.
I'm drawing a blank on her name.
I always forget. And I just read it today, but I always forget her name.
Kalenli.
Kalenli. I knew it ended with a Lee, like an L-I, but I couldn't remember the beginning.
And I knew it started with a K. Oh, Kel.
Kelly.
Anyway. Kalenli.
Yeah.
We still don't know what she was going to show them yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we see her home. It's very fancy. And Hoa has the realization that they've been keeping the rest of them in prison cells, which is disheartening.
Didn't know any better.
Gosh, what else? So much.
They're like playing amongst themselves, which is bizarre to see. Like, they're very childlike, and innocent, you know. They're just spinning around in circles, like arguing over whether that's a fish or a frog. Like rubbing the wooden floorboards. Like they've all got their own little thing that they're like focused on. And of course Hoa is staring at Kalenli because he's smitten, even though he doesn't realize what that even means. And she starts to kind of give the backstory of like where she came from. What triggers it, I forget what Hoa says, but she's like, you really don't know anything, do you? Like, you guys really are clueless. And then she jumps into the exposition.
Yeah, and how she had these parents that she thought were her parents, but they're really not. Because they created her. Right?
See,
I'm confused. I'm not going to lie. I'm still confused. I read the chapter.
I need to
reread it, I think.
I'm still not convinced that they were actually created. I think that they told them that they were created. You know? Yeah, I don't know. But for her, they like raised her basically in like a human environment. And so she like actually went to school and like all this stuff and experienced a somewhat normal upbringing.
But she still like isn't quite right.
Right. They also had a lot of like snares and comments on their way to her house. There was a guy that was like yelling at him, like, we should have killed all of you off, blah blah blah.
Genocide.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then she goes on to explain that there was this group of people whose name was hard to pronounce, so they got changed to like Nies, like Niess. And that group of people is where like the ice white eyes come from, and the ash blown hair. And so I guess that means that Shafa has some ancestry of these people.
That was my thought as well.
So I think that this is just it's a group of people that was like far away in the south because the land is split into 3 sections right now. We don't have a Pangea situation. The continents are split up, but on one of them there's this group of people who like split their tongues, and like they've got some interesting customs and stuff.
Well, the Syl Anagistines took the Nice's land.
Yeah.
And then there's like a great diaspora, and the Nice end up everywhere. But they keep their own language, but they learn everyone else's language.
Pretty much, yeah.
And they maintain some of their old ways, like splitting their tongues with salt acid, for reasons known only to them.
Which sounds very uncomfortable, I must say. The tongue splitting.
And while they lost much of the distinctive look that came of isolation within their small island, or their small land, many retained enough of it to this day. White eyes and ash-blow hair carry a certain stigma. And they had a lot of magic.
Yes, that's what made them different. And there was like a difference between how they viewed it. Like in Syl Anagist, it says they cultivated magic in every flower bed and tree line and grapevine. But then the Nice didn't kind of believe in magic as a resource. They didn't think it could be owned. They didn't think you could like harness it that way. They were kind of like hippies, magic hippies. They were like, no man, this is art.
Right.
And like they're the ones that made the
Plutonic engine.
The Plutonic engine.
It was pretty.
That's just pretty, even though it's like a totally self-sustaining energy source. And then the other people are like, we must use this to We must ensnare it and use it to power our utopia.
Yeah, this is crafted for the sheer joy of crafting. And yet
Yeah.
this art ran more efficiently and powerfully than anything the Syl Anagist had ever managed.
It's because it had heart and soul and love. I feel like there's some kind of anti-industrialist
Oh, for sure.
language in here. Definitely.
Yeah, and that made these people look different, behave differently, were different, but every group is different from others. Differences alone are never enough to cause problems. Syl Anagist's assimilation of the world had been over for a century before I was ever made. All cities were Syl Anagist. All languages had become Syl Anagistine. But there are none so frightened or so strange in their fear as conquerors. They conquer phantoms endlessly, terrified that their victims will someday do back what was done to them, even if, in truth, their victims couldn't care less about such pettiness and have moved on. Conquerors live in dread of the day when they are shown to be not superior, but simply lucky.
Yeah. Also talk about how the Nice were kind of demonized. It kind of was in everyone's minds that they weren't the same kind of human as everyone else, eventually not as human as everyone else, and finally not human at all. And they just kind of got killed off. But they figured out through studies of Nice prisoners that there weren't any differences. They were just regular people. Which they didn't like. So, and that's why it says they were created to be it says, we, the carefully engineered and denatured remnants of the Nice, have Cecipine far more complex than those of ordinary people. Kalenli was made first, but she wasn't different enough. Remember, we must not be just tools, but myths. Thus, we later creations have been given exaggerated Nice features, broad faces, small mouths, skin nearly devoid of color, hair that laughs at fine combs, and we're all so short. They turned them into Nice caricatures, which is so messed up. If they really were created, I don't know. But if they were created, I mean, I think at the very least, I don't think they were just pure test tube babies. I think that they were mutated from actual Nice people.
Yeah.
I don't think that they were just completely created.
Yeah.
I think they were transformed somehow with some wacky, nasty, I don't know, something. But, yeah, man. Crazy.
So, what else do we learn from this chapter?
They're going... Well, she mentioned that she's going to go show them the last few things tomorrow. Did she hint at what that is? Something about the cemetery for the niece or something? There was something like that.
Yeah, she reveals that she sees herself as a lorist, which is interesting because in the next chapter we have another lorist reveal.
Yeah.
She believes herself to be the last niece lorist. And explains that lorists were warriors, storytellers, and nobility. They told their truths in books and songs and through their art engines.
Oh, Hoa asks, so she's trying to show them how to master the onyx. Everything I'm telling you should help. Finally, she pushes me back aside so that we can go. The question must be asked now. So what happened? I say slowly to the niece. She stops and chuckles. You'll find out tomorrow. We're going to go see them. I'm confused. To their graves? And then she says, life is sacred in Syl Anagist. Don't you know that? And then she turns and goes. So we don't actually know what it is, but that's what Hoa thought that she meant. But I guess we'll see. It should be interesting for sure. I'm sure more exposition bombs, more crazy stuff will be revealed.
I'm sure.
But yeah.
Man, wild. Can you call them exposition bombs when they're in the last book?
Well, it's
And in the
okay.
last half
It's
of the
a
last book?
it's a reveal, but it's a dramatic reveal.
Lore drop.
Yeah. New lore just dropped.
From the lorist.
Yes.
Anyway.
Ha ha ha. But speaking of people who are lorists, apparently, yeah, the last chapter with Essun.
We're in the desert, and everything sucks.
Pretty much. That's correct.
Yeah, Ika is keeping up a very swift pace, which is causing problems, which is to be expected.
I mean, you're in the desert. Don't want to be there too long.
Right. She's
But,
in a very tough place of you have to keep moving or you won't survive. But also, if you keep moving, people might not survive.
Yeah.
So
I think it was funny that Essun mentioned that she feels like she's cheating because she knows, like, I am not actually in any danger at all because Hoa can zip me away to anywhere we want to go. Like, she can fast travel.
yeah. Yes.
So she's not really in any danger at all. But she's still, like, staying with everyone, you know, even though she knows that she's not going to die from this.
Well, and in so doing, we find out at the end of this chapter that Hoa is in fact looking out for all of them. Because he's,
Yes.
like, dealing with these monsters in the sand that they can't see, that are, like, underground.
Fixing their wagon axles when they're about to break.
Yeah. There's a lady that they end up having to leave behind. She tells him to leave her behind. And he goes back to her and sings her to death. That sounds weird. But, like, she's dying and he sings to her to ease pain.
Yeah, which is apparently a song that Antimony sang to Alabaster.
Yeah.
So now we know what that was about.
Yes. So he's like, see, she didn't die alone. And I'm looking out for all of you, which is very sweet.
Yeah.
But doesn't make it any less depressing.
Yes. No, it was very dark, dreary.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, Essence is speaking with, her name starts with a D. Like Dallin or something. I don't know. Danelle. Okay. All I could think of was Dalinar, but that's from Stormlight Archive, totally different book series. But like, I just had
Danelle.
that name stuck in my head. Yeah. So Danelle was like the general when when Kastream was being attacked by Renanis, and it turns out she was actually a lorist before, but the Equatorial lorists were also like trained in hand-to-hand combat to like protect the like knowledge that they had. So like this whole idea of lorists being like this warrior class is like so.
It makes me think of monks from D&D, like the monk class.
Yeah.
That Beauregard is in Campaign 2 of.
The Cobalt Soul.
Yeah.
Guardians of Knowledge. Yeah, so that was an interesting conversation. And she basically says, where was it? She was like, it makes sense to go there. Like, it's the right move. But she doesn't want to go back to Renanis. So basically, she's saying that, like, yes, it's the right move to go there. Your headwoman is right. Like, it's better than being calmless. But it's still terrible. And I'd rather stay on the move. And then Essen says, no calm is that bad. And then Daniel says, just think about it. So I'm curious what they're going to find. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to quite be the salvation they're hoping it'll be. Once they finally arrive, I think they'll discover that maybe there's something wrong over there. But I guess we'll see.
Yeah.
There's just this sense of unease and foreboding, like nothing matters, nowhere is safe. This is terrible. We're all dying. Like that's just kind of what these chapters are giving. It's very dark.
Yeah, and if we stay in the desert, we're for sure done for. So we have to go somewhere. Poor Lerna is also trying to keep up with all the injuries and everything, and it's a lot for him. Essun and Lerna are
They're sleeping together.
they're and kind of a couple, sort of,
But, like,
but not.
she doesn't feel as strongly for him as he does for her.
No, not
And
at all.
it's weird.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
But I feel like I'm sorry. That's been like Essen's whole journey of romantic partners.
Yeah.
She didn't really. In fact, she pretty much hated Alabaster.
Mm-hmm.
And then ended up loving him. And I don't know. Did she ever really love? I mean, Gija, was there a strong connection, or was it self-preservation? We don't know, because we weren't around for that inception. But
the only person that she, like, actually pursued, I feel like, was her and Alabaster's pirate boy.
yeah. Oh gosh, I can't remember his name.
Me neither. But
I know who you're talking about, though.
yeah, from the first book. But yeah, every other relationship she's had has been very, like, forced together.
Transactional.
Learned to love them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for maybe Hoa, who's just steadfast in there.
Yeah.
But that's weird because he was presenting as a child for
A long time.
90% of the story. No, not quite that much. 60% of the story.
It's odd, for sure.
It's odd.
But yeah, they eventually make it out of the desert into a river delta region, and they are really close now to getting to their destination. But they make it out, and, like, hundreds of people end up dying on the way through the desert.
Yeah.
But who knows? If it wasn't for Hoa, how many more would it have been? Because he did a lot of protecting, for sure. So.
They also have, like, that brief moment when they finally get out of the desert where everyone kind of scatters for a minute and just, like, recoups.
Yeah.
And then comes back together. Some of them come back together.
I mean, those are the chapters. I feel like we didn't learn a ton from Essun's chapter as far as, like, new information. It was just a lot of, well, other than I think we were given that sense of foreboding that Renanus isn't necessarily the safest haven that they think it's going to be.
No.
Even if it is the correct move, it's not like suddenly their lives are going to be a million times better. You know, they're still going to have some struggles. So I guess we got that. They've got their little guardian, Hoa. And we learned about Essun and Lerna's evolving relationship. So I guess those are the main things that we got.
So I was just looking at this little bit where Hoa's like explaining how he kept them safe. And then he says, "Does any of this comfort you? I hope so. I'm still human, I told you. Your opinion matters to me. I'm still human." What?
Yeah. See, again, I think that they were like, I think that they're transformed people. Like, they were.
Or does he mean that he's become human? Or that even if they're not human, they're human, they're people?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
Anyway.
We'll see. Yeah.
So for next time, you're going to read chapters 10 through 11.
Mm-hmm. Cool. 10 through 11.
And there is Syl Anagist 1 in between those two chapters.
Yeah.
So
similar to this week's assignment.
Yes. Almost done, guys. I need to get the next poll ready for you. I've only got 3 weeks of this book left.
Over halfway.
Woo-hoo.
All right. Well, I guess until next time, happy reading.
And we'll talk at you next time.
Later.